Hey folks, my name is Aaron, and welcome back to Major History. Last time, we discussed the origin of humanity, touching on the origin of the universe and life as a whole, and we talked about early hominids, or human-like people, how they migrated and populated, postulated some theories as to why the Neanderthals went extinct. And today, we're going to be talking about the Stone Age and religious complexity around that time. But firstly, I think we have to define what the Stone Age is. And broadly, the Stone Age is the time period in which humans relied on stone tools. The first hominids to do this being Homo habilis, and that started around 250,000 years ago. And it ended around 3000 BCE. And to those who don't know, BCE is before Common Era. It's basically like the Christian before Christ, but it's just non-denominational, or it stays away from religion as a whole. So BCE is before Common Era, and CE is Common Era, whereas in the Christian sense, it would have been AD or Anno Domini, which is in the year of our Lord. So we don't have to talk about that. We'll just talk about the Stone Age, folks. And it can actually be separated into two different parts, so we don't have to be talking about this 250,000 year time span individually. We'll just be covering them into two different parts, including the Paleolithic period and the Neolithic period. And these two periods are not evenly sized, but more so even in content. Because, the Neolithic Revolution, which took place around 10,000 BCE, I didn't put the tilde there for some reason, I'm sorry, that would have been helpful, but that's the divide, is around 10,000 BCE with with agriculture. So, we're gonna firstly cover the Paleolithic period first, because, it comes first chronologically, so why not? Some characteristics of the Paleolithic period included sophisticated stone tools, living in caves, the beginning of culture, which in this sense, culture is everything that humans created that is apart from nature, and the results of cooperation as a whole. And yeah, so next is hunting and gathering, in which men and women had equal contribution for providing food for their little bands. And the men hunted, the women gathered, but all in all, they provided sustenance for their tribes pretty much equally. And also, it was knowledge and ideas were widespread throughout humans at this time, including the use of fire and the creation of tools and weapons such as spears, bows and arrows, knives, and the like, fish hooks, throwing sticks. Yeah, stuff like that were being used by pretty much every band of civilization. And speaking of these bands, social organization is another characterization of the Paleolithic period, because at this time humans were nomadic in bands of 20 to 50 people, and they were more or less extended families of each other. And because of this, there was no real leadership. Everybody had an equal role, so everybody was more or less equal, making it an egalitarian society, which is unheard of today. And it's actually a sort of primitive communism as well, because besides tools, everything was communal. And I even think, actually, I should take that back. Even the tools were more or less communal, and there was no private ownership of anything. So I thought that was interesting to put in there. The next thing I want to discuss is the primitive religious ideas of the Paleolithic people. So animism, which is the belief that the world is animated by spirits or souls. These people were pretty much like amazed by the world and didn't comprehend natural sciences that were taking place around them, or they didn't understand nature like we do and were fascinated by it. And they came to think that every living thing had a soul, and everything that moved is the work of a spirit, such as like the wind, the rain, volcanoes, basically any activity. This meant that a spirit was somehow involved, and it was an ahistorical time. So the mindset of humans at this time, they didn't really concern themselves with the past, and therefore couldn't picture or comprehend the future, because they were so focused in the then and now, such as we need to eat, we need to follow the food, we need to find water. This thing poses a threat to us, we need to kill it. So everything had to happen right then and there. Totems representing animals. So totems were something that existed around this time. They were modeled after animals and believed that these humans, and it's believed by historians and archaeologists that humans actually worshipped these animals. And the thought process was more or less, animals are food, food provides sustenance, and sustenance allows life to flourish and continue. So shamans existed at this time. They were more or less spiritual experts than like the Asian shaman, and they were eventually lead hunting rites, prayers, chants, and sacrifices, all done in the spirit of the animal or whatever they were trying to do. And it's also at this point that art had its humble beginnings. And it was all religious and ceremonial. It was all cave drawings of various animals in the surrounding area, and they often depicted a story of some kind, and archaeologists tend to think that there was some sort of song and dance ritual that happened to pair along with it. It was more of a show than anything, apparently. Okay, that's it for the Paleolithic period. So we're going to do the Neolithic period, which some characteristics of those are food production, which included animal herding and horticulture. Horticulture, not agriculture, because agriculture at this point is more primitive, more so like gardening. And it's also characterized by new knowledge and technologies, including the plant cycle. Women were the horticulturalists and were therefore close to plants and understood their cycle. Natural elements and cyclical time, so they understood seasons and how things around them interacted with time. Digging sticks and stone hoes were a thing, so they could, dig holes and till the soil to farm. And then people got in the habit of collecting seeds. And finally, sorry. The Ice Age happened too. So, almost forgot that was happening around the same time. So yeah, here's some early farming practices of around this time. Horticulture began in Africa. They farmed fruits, vegetables, grains, herbal medicine, and in Africa specifically, they invented pottery, which allowed them to store oils and other such things, and it actually aided with like cooking and stuff. And then here are some of the things that grew in Africa that they cultivated, like sorghum, gourds, cotton, sesame, black-eyed peas, peanuts, watermelons. And then, agriculture wasn't just happening in Africa, so in the Middle East, they cultivated goats. Yep, that's right. No, they herded goats, sheep, and they cultivated barley and wheat. And then in Southeast Asia, they had chickens, yama, bananas, rice. South America, they had potatoes. So yeah, and potatoes I only put potatoes there because it's sort of a catch-all. You could live just off of potatoes. They're almost. They're that nutritious. So yeah, so that's every region. And then is the development of sedentary societies in which people stayed in one spot. So people would often settle in people would often settle permanently in resource-rich areas, areas with lots of land, water, and animals to hunt, as well as the population started to grow around this time as well, and because of the agriculture, because of horticulture, because they were having a more reliable source of food and water, population began to grow a lot faster. There was also public architecture, such as shrines and temples being built. Language was being developed as well. Social complexity was on the rise with kinship organization, in which everybody in their village was extended family. And eventually that was sort of broken apart when cities started to form, such as Uruk and Sumer. And then, yeah, now we can move on to religious complexity, which starts with pantheism, the religion of nature, which is the belief that the earth is the divine creator, earth is the home, nature is God, you worship nature, and God was generally viewed as female, and I'll defend this because the thought process is females create life and nurture it, they feed them from their own bodies, and females at this point were the decision makers, the leaders of households. Females were closer with nature through gathering and horticulture, and thus they were closer to God. And the economy was based off of horticulture as well. Like trade was through the amount of food you had. Wealth was determined by the amount of surplus that you had, and thus that whole part of society was ruled by women, and thus the economy was ruled more or less by women. So God became a female sort of idea. And the moon was also a goddess because of its connection to the female cycle through menstruation. And plants were sacred, and, women dealt with plants. So that's another thing. But plants were sacred. They provide nourishment, life, sustenance, all those things. So anything that basically allowed life to continue and flourish was worshipped. And there were nature spirits, which guarded the wilderness and the nature. And there were fertility rituals for these spirits, so people would pray to spirits and nourish them with sacrifices of material or people, and they did this so that they could they thought that they had a hand in allowing the land to stay fertile. And shamanism rose from this as well, spiritual guides and healers. And by healers, I mean people attempted to cure people of unnatural ailments, like things that you couldn't really see, like illnesses and diseases that weren't necessarily manifesting physically. Like a physical ailment would be like a broken leg or something, or like a cut. But people consider these considered illnesses to be unnatural ailments. There was ancestor worship, in which people created burial sites or even buried people beneath their own houses. And by keeping the remains of your ancestors, you were actually able to provide proof of ownership of property. So it's around this time, through ancestor worship, that people were starting to claim property as their own. Like they owned something. People were starting to own things for themselves for the very first time. And it was also around this time that sacred chiefs and rulers began to come into existence. Chiefdoms, which were communities governed by chiefs, and they often claimed ancestral lineage to the village. And chiefs were also commonly female. Leadership, or spiritual power, originated in modern-day Sudan, apparently, according to my professor. Doctor diviners, which I'm still a little fuzzy on what that is. I think that's healing through people that healed people through spiritual rituals and stuff like that. that originated in the areas such as Niger and the Congo. And Dr. Diviners were also advisors to the chiefs, and chiefs were also often surrounded by multiple spiritual advisors, which I thought was pretty interesting. So, and legitimacy for governing a society is often determined by access to otherworldly or spiritual powers. So it didn't necessarily have to be the chief. The chief of the village often became the leader, but in circumstances where that was not the case, they were surrounded by chief priests and doctor diviners as basically advisors. So that's it, guys. That's going to be it for my second lecture. A little bit of a short one this time, which I'm pretty happy about. So that's part 2 of my world civilization course. Next time, we're going to be talking about the rise of civilizations, Mesopotamia, stuff like that. And but we're not really going to be diving too deep into Mesopotamia just yet. I'll have a whole separate part of world civilization for that. We're going to cover that in like 3 videos, I think. So yeah, stay tuned for that. You should consider subscribing to my channel, hitting the notification button, liking the video often helps. That's probably what helps the most, actually. So, oh, and what are your thoughts on today's video? I'd love to hear them in the comment section down below. I like responding to comments, even though I haven't received any just yet as of this video. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you guys, and I hope to see you guys in the next one as well. And have a great day. Take care of yourself. And bye-bye.